I remember the night because of how quiet it was. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. The kind that settles over a place after everything living has decided to leave. I was driving a lonely stretch of desert road just after sunset. The sky still held a thin ribbon of orange light along the horizon, but darkness had already begun gathering beneath the mesas. The headlights swept across endless sagebrush and weathered fence posts, revealing little islands of light surrounded by oceans of shadow. My father used to say the land remembers things people forget. Back then, I thought he was talking about history. Now I'm not so sure. The farther I drove, the more distant the world felt. The radio faded into static. My phone lost service. Even the wind seemed reluctant to cross that empty country. When I finally stopped near an old trail marker, I stepped outside and listened. Nothing. No insects. No distant traffic. No rustling grass. Only silence. Then I noticed something strange. A second set of footprints in the dust. Fresh. Walking beside my truck. The problem was simple. I had been alone for nearly 40 miles. The tracks continued toward a line of dark hills where moonlight barely touched the ground. I should have gotten back in the truck. I should have driven away. Instead, I followed them, and that's when I saw it. The desert was already awake before I realized it. Late afternoon light stretched across the sand in long, pale sheets. Everything looked washed out, quiet, endless. My truck sat alone on the cracked ground, engine cooling with soft ticking metal. Dust clung to the tires, to the mirrors, to the air itself. There had been no one here for hours. No road behind me that mattered. No direction ahead that felt certain. Only heat and silence that pressed against the skin like dry hands. I stepped out again. The ground was still warm beneath my boots. Grainy sand shifting with each movement. The scent of sun-baked sage drifted in faint waves, mixed with dry stone and old wind. That's when I noticed them. Footprints. Fresh. Darkened by pressure. Right beside my truck. I stopped. The wind didn't move. Not even slightly. The air felt suspended, like the desert had paused mid-breath. The prints were too close, too deliberate, walking parallel to where I had been standing moments before. I looked down at my own boots, then back at the marks. They matched my pace. Exactly. A slow, tightening chill spread under my ribs. Not fear yet. Something quieter. Something harder to name. I followed them. Each step I took, they continued beside me. Same rhythm, same spacing. As if another version of me had walked here seconds earlier and never stopped. But there was no one, only the long stretch of sand and the distant, broken horizon. The sun dipped lower. Shadows began to stretch thin and sharp. Then I saw the hill. Far ahead, a dark rise in the desert, barely shaped against the sky. At first, it looked empty, just rock and dust. But something stood there, motionless, not clearly human, not clearly anything else. Just a vertical absence against the fading light. Watching, I slowed without meaning to. The footprints beside me continued forward anyway. Perfect, steady, unchanging. My breath felt louder now, each inhale scratching dry air down my throat. The scent of sage grew stronger, almost bitter, like it had been crushed under invisible weight. I looked away from the hill for just a second. When I looked back, the figure was still there, closer, or maybe I had moved without noticing. The desert does that. It steals certainty. I stepped again. The prints remained beside me, but something was wrong now. They were fading, not disappearing completely, just losing definition, like memory bleeding out of paper, edges softening, depth collapsing. I followed faster. My boots pressed harder into the sand. The phantom footprints matched for a few more steps, then slowed, then hesitated, then stopped altogether. I froze. The only sound was my own breath, rough, uneven, too alive in the empty space. I looked down. Only my tracks remained now, leading back toward the truck, toward nowhere. The other set gone, as if they had never existed at all. The hill drew my attention again. The figure still stood there, but now it felt less distant, less static. It felt aware. The air around it seemed heavier, like heat bending light into something unstable. Even the wind refused to pass through that space. I took one step back. The sand shifted differently beneath my boot. Too soft, too delayed, like something underneath had moved after me. I turned toward the truck instinctively. Its metal surface glowed faintly under the dying sun. A pale reflection of myself warped in the window. For a moment, I thought I saw movement inside. But when I looked directly, there was nothing. Only empty seats. Dust. Stillness. I exhaled slowly. And that's when I realized the silence had changed. Not louder, not softer, just closer, like it had moved in around me. I looked down again. My footprints were still there, but now they didn't feel like mine. They felt watched. Behind me, the desert stretched wide and empty. Ahead, the hill held its patient shape. Between them, I stood, suspended, uncertain which direction still belonged to me. The last light of day bled into the horizon. Everything turned pale, weightless, almost unreal. And just before the darkness fully settled in, I saw it again. A single imprint forming in the sand beside my boot. Fresh, new, matching my stance perfectly, even though I hadn't moved. Night came early on the open road. The kind of night that doesn't feel like arrives. It just replaces everything. My headlights cut through empty miles of dust and dry brush. No other cars. No signs of movement. Only the steady hum of tires on cracked asphalt and the slow pull of darkness pressing in from all sides. That's when I saw it. A house, set back from the road like it had been forgotten mid-thought. Wooden, low, weather-worn. A ranch house sitting alone in the middle of nowhere. No nearby fences. No barns. No grazing land. Just silence and open land stretching in every direction. I slowed the truck without deciding to. The air outside felt different as I stepped down. Cooler, heavier, carrying a faint, unfamiliar scent. Wax, old candle wax, soft and stale, like it had been trapped in fabric for years. The house didn't look abandoned at first glance, but something about it refused to feel alive. A porch light glowed above the door, steady at first, then flickering, not like electricity failing, more like a hesitation, like something trying to remember how light is supposed to behave. I looked for power lines. There were none. No poles. No cables cutting across the sky. Just open night and that single trembling light above the porch. It shouldn't have been on, and yet it was. I stepped closer. The wooden boards beneath my boots groaned softly, aged and dry. Dust rose in thin clouds, catching the light in brief golden flashes. The air grew thicker near the door. The smell of candle wax intensified, mixed now with something older. Paper, fabric, time itself, folded and stored too long. The door was slightly open, not wide, just enough to suggest invitation, without intention. Inside, the house was dim. No electricity, no lamps, only the porch light spilling weak. Unstable glow through the doorway. I hesitated, then stepped in. The first thing I saw was the photographs. Frames lined the hallway walls. Neat, careful, almost obsessive. Family portraits. Smiling faces frozen under glass that had dulled with age. But something was wrong in every single one. A stranger, standing just behind them, or beside them, or sometimes too close to the camera, like it had always been there. Same figure, every photo, different angle, same presence. I moved closer to one frame. My reflection hovered over the glass, faint and unstable. Behind it, the stranger stood again, watching, not smiling, not moving, just present. A pressure built behind my eyes, like the house was noticing me noticing it. The candle wax smell deepened. Now I could almost feel it, warm and stale, clinging to the air like invisible residue. I turned away from the photos and looked down the hallway. Dark rooms open on either side. Too quiet, too arranged. Nothing felt disturbed. Nothing felt lived in. Yet everything felt recently remembered. Then the porch light flickered again. Once, twice. A sharp, deliberate rhythm. Not random, not electrical. Intentional. My stomach tightened before my thoughts could form around it. I turned toward the door instinctively. That's when I heard it. A knock from above, not the front door, not the walls. From the attic. The sound was slow, measured, like something testing whether I was still listening. I stood still. The house responded with silence, so complete it felt physical. The portraits along the wall seemed darker now, the stranger in them less like a detail, more like a certainty. Another knock, closer this time. Dust shifted somewhere above me, drifting down in soft, invisible currents I could feel more than see. The porch light outside flickered again. Once, twice, and stayed on. The air inside the house changed with it. Heavier, pressurized, as if the structure had sealed itself. I took a step backward toward the door. The floorboards didn't creak this time. They sank, just slightly, like they were remembering weight. Another knock came from the attic. No rhythm now, just presence, a reminder. My breath slowed without permission, each inhale tasting faintly of wax and old wood. I reached the doorway. The porch light outside still burned, but it didn't feel like guidance anymore. It felt like observation. I stopped at the threshold. Something inside the house shifted behind me. Not footsteps, not movement, recognition. I didn't turn back. The wind outside was absent. The night was still. The desert beyond the porch stretched endless and black. Behind me, the house remained silent again. Too silent. The kind of silence that doesn't mean absence, only waiting. I stepped out slowly. The moment my boots touched the porch, the candle wax smell vanished, cut off instantly, like a door had closed somewhere unseen. I didn't look back at the house. Not immediately. I just stood there beneath the flickering porch light. Once, twice, steady again, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better now, because in the reflection of the window, beside the door, the stranger was still there, and it was standing exactly where I had been. The diner appeared just after midnight, a thin strip of light on an empty highway, surrounded by miles of dark road and sleeping land. No town, no houses, no movement beyond the slow drift of wind across dry asphalt. Only the diner. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, letters half dead, flickering between glow and absence. The hum of electricity felt older than the building itself. I pulled in without thinking. The engine cooled with a tired shudder, hot metal ticking under the night air, mixing with the smell of dust and old rubber. Inside, the air was heavier, warm, greasy, familiar in a way that didn't belong to me. Coffee burned somewhere behind the counter. Frying oil lingered in the air, even though nothing seemed to be cooking at that moment. The place was open, but not alive. A few customers sat scattered across booths. None of them spoke. None of them looked at each other. And all of them avoided one table. A booth in the far corner. Half-shadowed, half-lit, empty but not unused. The waitress noticed me the moment I stepped in. Her movements were slow, careful, like she had learned not to disturb the air too much. "You shouldn't sit there," she said softly. Her voice barely carried above the hum of the lights. I followed her gaze. The empty booth. It looked normal at first glance. Vinyl seat cracked with age. Table slightly stained with old coffee rings. But everything around it seemed to bend away from it. Even the light avoided it. I sat at the counter instead. The stool creaked under my weight, stretching the silence tighter. The waitress poured coffee without asking. Dark, thick, almost too still in the cup. I didn't drink it. Not yet. Behind me. The other customers remained frozen in their patterns. Forks lifted halfway. Cups held midair. No conversation. No laughter. No motion beyond breathing. Or what felt like breathing. The smell of grease deepened. Not fresh cooking. More like memory. Oil that had soaked into the walls and never left. I glanced toward the corner booth again. Something felt wrong about not looking at it directly, like it existed more strongly when ignored. A faint reflection appeared in the window beside me. At first, I thought it was mine, but the angle was off. The booth in the reflection was occupied. Someone sitting there, still, upright, watching. I turned quickly. The booth was empty. Only cracked vinyl and shadow. I looked back at the window. The figure was still there, now leaning slightly forward, closer than before. My chest tightened, slow and steady, like pressure building in seal glass. The waitress moved behind the counter again, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the booth. "Don't acknowledge it," she said quietly. Not warning, not instruction, more like memory. The lights above us flickered once, a soft stutter of brightness. For a fraction of a second, every reflection in the diner shifted at the same time, every single one, all facing the booth. I didn't move, neither did anyone else, except the reflection in the window. It smiled, just slightly, not friendly, not human in the way it should have been. Then it stopped, gone again, like it had only been borrowing the moment. I swallowed hard. The coffee in front of me had cooled without me noticing. A faint bitterness rose from it, sharp and metallic at the back of my throat, even without drinking. From the corner booth, a chair creaked, soft, slow, not loud enough for others to react, but enough for me. I didn't turn. The air in the diner changed instead. Heavier, focused, like everything inside had shifted attention at once. The waitress stopped moving. The other customers stopped mid-motion. Even the hum of the lights seemed to flatten. Something was sitting in that booth now, not visible, not fully formed, but present in a way that pressed against everything around it. The reflection in the window returned. This time it didn't sit. It stood behind the booth, behind me, but not behind me in the diner, only in the glass. I finally looked away, down at the counter. My coffee rippled once, even though nothing touched it, a slow circle expanding outward, like something had just exhaled into it. The waitress leaned closer. Her voice was barely a thread. "Don't finish that," she said. I didn't ask why. I already understood enough not to want the answer clearly spoken. Behind me, the booth remained quiet again, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was occupied, and the reflection in the window stayed there a moment longer than it should have, watching, waiting, until I stopped looking. The road narrowed long before I saw the settlement, a broken stretch of gravel and old dirt, swallowed on both sides by tall corn that moved even when the wind didn't. It was late evening. The sky had gone pale violet, stretched in like fabric held too tight. Light drained slowly, refusing to disappear all at once. The air smelled of damp earth, fresh irrigation, like water had passed through here recently. Even though nothing around suggested life, the settlement came into view without warning. Old farm structures, low houses, a silo leaning slightly as if tires standing. Everything quiet, preserved, forgotten, but not abandoned in the way empty places are supposed to be. This felt maintained, like something still came back here. I stopped the truck at the edge of the cornfield. The engine clicked as it cooled, metal ticking softly into the growing silence. I stepped out. The ground beneath my boots was softer than expected, dark soil still holding moisture, releasing a faint smell of minerals and wet roots. The corn rose around me in uneven rows, too tall, too dense, blocking the horizon completely, as if the world had ended just beyond it. That's when I saw them, 3 figures, standing deep inside the field, between rows of corn, half hidden, half revealed. At first, I thought they were scarecrows, but they weren't fixed. They were alive in the worst possible way. Still, not frozen like statues, more like they had agreed not to move unless the world stopped watching. I blinked. They hadn't changed position, but something in the distance felt wrong. The space between them wasn't consistent. The air itself felt rearranged. A slow unease spread through my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Something heavier. Recognition of pattern. I took a step forward. The soil squished softly beneath me, releasing a damp, cold scent that clung to the back of my throat. The corn rustled, but not from wind, from attention. I looked back at the figures. Still 3, still distant, still watching without visible faces. I walked along the edge of the field, trying to keep them in sight. Every few steps, I glanced away for only a moment, and every time I looked back, their positions had changed. Subtle, impossible to track clearly. 1 row closer, One angle shifted. One figure now slightly ahead of the others. But never all at once. Never when I was looking. My breathing slowed without permission. The air felt thicker now, as if the field itself was resisting my presence. A faint sound rose from somewhere inside the corn, dry leaves brushing against each other. Soft, constant, like whispering without words. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. Complete silence dropped instantly. Too complete. Even insects had gone quiet. Then I saw it. One of the figures was closer than it should have been, not by distance that made sense, by something else. It stood between two corn rows only a few meters away now, still facing me, still motionless, but no longer part of the distant group. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen it move. Not once. The other two figures remained far back, exactly where they had been. But this one had arrived. The corn around it bent slightly inward, like something had passed through without touching anything. The smell of wet earth grew stronger, almost sour now. I stepped backward. Slow, careful. The ground responded too late, like it was deciding whether to allow me to leave. A soft rustle moved behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing. Only corn. Only rows. But the sound felt too close to be imagination. When I looked back again, the nearer figure had tilted its head, just slightly. Not a human motion. Not quite wrong, but incomplete, like a gesture remembered incorrectly. My pulse began to press against my ears. I forced myself to keep watching all three figures at once, but the field made that impossible. Every blink felt like losing information. Every glance away felt like surrendering something I couldn't recover. The wind finally returned. Barely. A thin breath moving through the corn, making it sway in uneven waves. But the figures didn't sway with it. They stayed anchored, unnatural, separate from the movement of everything else. I stepped again, a retreat toward the truck. The closer figure didn't follow immediately. It just stood there, as if waiting for me to decide what was allowed to do. Then I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, not rustling, a shift in spacing. I turned. The second figure was gone from its original position, not visible anymore. The corn behind it looked untouched, but the absence felt heavier than presence. My chest tightened sharply. I looked back toward the truck. It felt farther away than before, not physically, visually, as if the field had expanded while I wasn't paying attention. Then I saw it again. Not the closest figure, not the distant one. Something between, half emerged from the corn rows, closer than any of them had been. I hadn't seen it past the others. I hadn't seen it move at all, and yet it was now almost aligned with me. The corn around it bent inward again, a slow, deliberate curve, like the field was making space. For it, my breath turned shallow. I stepped back one more time. The soil gave slightly under my heel. Behind me, the settlement waited in silence. In front of me, the field had changed shape without admitting it. The three figures were still there, but I no longer trusted the count. Something felt missing, or added, or repeated. The closer figure remained still. But now I noticed something I hadn't before. Its stance matched mine. Not perfectly, but enough to make my stomach drop. Same weight shift, same angle of shoulders, same hesitation and stillness. I didn't move again. Neither did it. The corn whispered softly around us, and for a moment that stretched too long. I couldn't tell if I was standing outside the field looking in, or already inside it, being observed from somewhere I couldn't see. Then all three figures shifted at once. Not toward me, not away, just enough to remind me. They were no longer where I last remembered them. The windmill stood at the edge of nothing, a broken stretch of land where dry grass flattened into cracked soil and a horizon blurred under a low, heavy sky. Evening had settled early, pulling color out of everything until only muted browns and fading gold remained. The air smelled of rust, old metal, heated dust, something long forgotten. The windmill turned, slowly, even though there was no wind. I stood a few steps away, boots pressing into brittle grass that crumbled underweight like dry paper. The structure creaked above me, each rotation stretching the silence into thin, uneasy lines. The blades move against still air, perfectly steady, perfectly wrong. I should have left. That thought came late, like it had to travel through something before reaching me. Instead, I moved closer. The metal frame was older than it looked at first glance. Layers of paint peeling away like skin losing memory. Each step toward it carried the scent of dry iron and sun-scorched wood. The platform beneath the windmill was raised slightly above the ground. Shadows pooled underneath it, thick, motionless, too dark to belong to the fading daylight. I paused at the base. The windmill turned again. A slow groan of metal filled the space around me, but the air remained completely still. No breeze, no movement in the grass, only the machine insisting on motion without reason. Then I heard it, my name, soft, carried from beneath the platform. Not loud enough to echo, not sharp enough to demand attention, just close enough to make the world feel too small. I froze. The rust smell deepened, as if the air itself had aged in that moment. I looked down into the darkness under the windmill. Nothing clear at first, only layered shadow, shifting slightly where it shouldn't. Then the whisper came again, not just my name this time. Stories, fragments of childhood I had not spoken aloud in years. A memory of a broken fence I once had behind. A summer night I thought no one remembered. A voice counting steps I had taken as a child, in a place far from here. Each detail arrived wrong in its precision, too accurate, too intact. My throat tightened. The windmill turned above me again, slower now, or maybe I was noticing each rotation more clearly. The metal frame groaned like it was tired of pretending to be empty. I stepped closer to the edge of the platform. The darkness underneath felt deeper now, not empty, occupied. A whisper drifted up again, closer, right beneath the boards. My name. I answered silently in my mind, though I hadn't meant to respond. The shadows shifted, just slightly, like something had adjusted its posture. Then the voice continued, not repeating words, replaying them, my own memories, spoken back to me in a tone that didn't belong to any version of myself I remembered. I backed away one step. The windmill did not stop. It kept turning, each blade cutting through still air with mechanical patience. Then the ground beneath it shifted, not visibly, but in weight, a subtle change in pressure that made the space feel less stable. Something was coming upward, slowly, from beneath. The rust smell sharpened, metal heated, an invisible sun. Dry earth disturbed after long silence. The whisper stopped. Complete silence followed. Too complete. Even the windmill seemed to hesitate mid-turn, as if listening. Then, a sound like scraping wood against stone. From below, deliberate, climbing. My chest tightened so sharply it felt like breath might refuse to continue. I stepped back again. The structure above creaked louder now, as if reacting to what moved beneath it. The blades rotated, but unevenly, stuttering for the first time. A shadow pressed against the underside of the platform, not fully visible, just suggestion, shape without permission. The whisper returned, but no longer gentle, no longer familiar. It spoke my name again, and this time it sounded closer than memory. I turned slightly, preparing to leave, but the windmill groaned louder, metal shifting, with complaining, something inside it changing its mind about being still. The climbing sound continued. One slow, deliberate pull at a time. Closer, closer. I backed away from the base completely now, eyes locked on the darkness beneath. The platform seemed lower than before, or the shadow had grown. I couldn't tell which. The air felt heavier, pressing against my ears, dulling everything except that rising sound. Then the voice spoke again, not from below, not from around, from everywhere at once. It used my childhood words again, but incorrectly this time, as if learning how I used the sound. The windmill turned once more, and for the first time, it cast a shadow that didn't match its shape. I stepped back into the grass. The rust smell lingered in my lungs like dust that refused to leave. Something reached the edge beneath the platform, not fully visible, only implied by the way the darkness shifted upward. I didn't wait to understand it. I turned away, but as I did, the whisper followed. Not behind me, inside the movement of the windmill itself, still turning, still calling my name, as if it had never been calling anything else. The canyon road unspooled ahead like a scar carved into stone. Night had already settled in the lower valleys, but up here the sky still held a fading bruise of blue and ash. Rock walls rose on both sides, rough and endless, swallowing what little light remained. My headlights cut a narrow path forward. Everything beyond it stayed unknown. The truck engine rumbled steadily, a low vibration under my hands. Tires rolled over uneven asphalt, scattering small stones into the dark behind me. That's when the smell changed. Motor oil. Thick, warm, wrong. It didn't belong in the open air. It belonged inside something. Inside metal. Inside machines. Inside closed spaces that should not be breathing. I glanced at the rearview mirror. At first, nothing unusual. Just the road fading behind me. The canyon narrowing into darkness. My own silhouette faintly framed in glass. Then I saw it, a second shape, sitting directly behind me. Not in the seat exactly, in the reflection of it. I slowed instinctively, even though nothing on the road demanded it. The shape was human enough to understand, but wrong enough to avoid defining. It didn't move when I looked. It simply existed, aligned with the back seat, like it had always been there. My throat tightened slightly, a dry swallow that didn't quite clear anything. I turned my head quickly. The back seat was empty. Dark fabric, dust, a faint crease where I'd thrown a jacket earlier. Nothing else. Only the quiet hum of tires and the canyon's slow breathing outside. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there, sitting exactly as before, as if my turning around had never mattered. A thin pressure formed behind my eyes. Not fear yet, something closer to recognition of error. I kept driving. The road curved left, hugging the canyon wall tighter. Rock loomed close enough to feel like it was leaning in. The smell of motor oil grew stronger. Now it felt warm, almost alive, like something had just been recently repaired inside the air itself. I checked the mirror again. The figure had changed position. Its head was tilted slightly to one side now, watching me more directly. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The truck continued forward, steady and unaware of what I had begun noticing. I forced myself to glance back. Empty seat. Still nothing there. Only space. Only darkness. Only the faint reflection of road vibration in glass. When I returned to the mirror, the figure was closer. Not physically. Visually. As if the mirror had adjusted depth without informing me. Now I could see its shoulders more clearly. The way it leaned slightly forward. Patient. Waiting. I exhaled slowly through my nose. The canyon narrowed further. Rock walls now felt almost close enough to scrape the sides of the truck, if I drifted even slightly. The headlights flickered across rough stone textures, revealing layers of ancient erosion that looked like frozen movement. The smell of motor oil thickened again. Now it carried something else. Heat. I checked the mirror again. The figure had moved. Not abruptly. Not like motion captured. More like it had decided to exist in a different posture when I wasn't measuring it. It was leaning closer to the space between the front seats. Still in the reflection. Still not in the physical world behind me. I turned quickly. Empty. Seat empty. No sound. No shift in air. No indication that anything had ever occupied the space. But when I looked forward again, the figure was smiling. Not broadly. Not obviously. Just enough to change everything about its presence. A curve that didn't belong in stillness. My chest tightened. The canyon road stretched ahead, but it felt narrower now. Less like a path and more like a passage I had already agreed to enter, without reading the terms. The motor oil smell reached its strongest point. So strong it felt like it coated the inside of my throat. I swallowed hard. It didn't help. The figure in the mirror shifted again. This time, it turned slightly sideways, as if watching something behind me that I couldn't access. My grip tightened on the wheel. I checked the back seat again. Nothing. Only fabric and shadow and the faint vibration of road movement. But the seatbelt behind me was slightly displaced. Not hanging the same way I remembered. I looked forward too quickly. The mirror showed the figure now sitting upright again, facing me directly. expression neutral. Too neutral, as if the smile had been an experiment. The canyon walls began to open slightly ahead. A wider stretch of road appeared, darker than what came before it, less enclosed, more uncertain. The truck's engine sound felt louder in the absence of tight rock reflection. I exhaled again, longer this time, trying to steady something I couldn't name. The mirror flickered, just for a moment, a brief distortion like heat haze crossing glass. And when it cleared, the figure was gone. No gradual fading, no retreat, just absence. I looked forward instinctively, then back. Empty seat, empty mirror. Only my own reflection now. Only me. The motor oil smell lingered for a few seconds longer, then began to thin, as if it had been tied to something that no longer maintained presence. The canyon road straightened ahead. Dark, open, silent. I kept driving. But something in the truck no longer felt like it belonged to just one occupant. And for the first time since I entered the canyon, I avoided looking at the mirror again. The ravine split the land like an old wound. I stood on the edge of it as night settled in slow layers, cooling the desert air into something sharper, quieter. Below, the drop disappeared into blackness, so deep it felt unfinished, like the earth had been cut and never healed. Across it, light. A campfire. Small, distant, perfectly still. Its glow trembled against the far wall of the ravine, painting stone in soft amber. Smoke rose upward in a thin, straight line that should have bent with wind, but didn't. The scent reached me anyway. Burning cedar. Strange, because the distance was too great for a smell to travel cleanly. Yet it did. Clear, present, almost comforting. I crouched near the edge. The rock beneath my fingers was cold, rough, holding the last memory of daytime heat. Tiny grains crumbled under pressure, falling silently into the void below. Across the ravine, the fire remained steady, and the figures around it did not move. At first, I thought it was just distance, too far to see detail, too dark for motion. But even when I focused, even when I strained my eyes against the darkness, nothing changed. They sat in a circle, around the fire, perfectly still, no shifting posture, no gestures, no turning heads toward one another, only presence, like they had been arranged, not gathered. The wind moved gently above me, brushing through dry brush behind my position. But across the ravine, the air seemed sealed off. The flames flickered, yet the people did not react. I should have left then. That thought came late again, like a delayed echo of instinct. Instead, I kept watching. The fire popped softly, a sharp, dry sound that carried too clearly through gap between cliffs. The scent of cedar deepened. Now it felt closer than the fire itself, as if it was already on my side of the ravine. I shifted slightly. Loose stones scraped under my boot and tumbled downward. No echo returned, only silence swallowing them whole. Across the gap, one of the figures seemed closer, not walking, not moving in any visible way, but occupying a different position than before. I blinked. When I opened my eyes again, another change had happened. The circle felt tighter, or I was misjudging distance, or something was adjusting itself when I wasn't looking directly. The firelight flickered higher for a moment, casting long shadows upward along the opposite cliff face. For an instant, those shadows didn't match the bodies below them. They stretched too far, bent incorrectly, then corrected, as if nothing had happened. My throat tightened slightly. The wind shifted behind me again, but not toward the ravine, away from it, as if the land itself refused to carry sound in that direction. I leaned forward carefully, trying to understand what I was seeing. The figures remained still, too still. Not even the rise and fall of breath was visible, only silhouettes held together by firelight. Then I noticed something at the edge of the circle, a shape that wasn't there before, closer to the fire than the others. It had not entered the scene. It had simply appeared in alignment, like it had always belonged there, and I was only now permitted to see it. My pulse slowed without permission. The cedar smell intensified again. Now it felt like it was coming from the ground beneath me, not across the ravine. From here, I stepped back instinctively. A small movement, almost nothing, but across the ravine, one of the figures turned its head, directly toward my position. I froze. The others did not react. Only that one, perfectly aligned with where I stood. Even though I was barely visible in the darkness, even though I was across a ravine too wide for detail, the fire dimmed for a moment, then returned to normal. But something had changed. The stillness was no longer neutral. It was aware. I slowly lowered myself closer to the rock edge again, watching carefully. The figure that had turned remained facing me, unmoving, watching without motion. Then another figure shifted, not turning, not standing, just adjusting its position within the circle. Now facing me too. My breath caught. I stepped back again, this time faster. Gravel slid beneath my boots, sharp against silence. Across the ravine, the entire circle seemed to tighten subtly, not approaching, just reorganizing. Like attention becoming structure, the fire crackled louder, too loud for its size, and the smell of cedar now carried something burnt underneath it. Old wood, old endings. I backed away from the edge completely now, but I didn't stop looking. The figures remained around the fire, still unmoving in body, but no longer indifferent in presence. Every one of them now oriented in my direction, as if the ravine was no longer separating us, only delaying contact. The fire burned steadily, unbothered, patient, and for the first time, I realized the smoke was not rising away. It was drifting slightly toward me. The highway was empty long before I saw her, a long stretch of asphalt cut through open desert, fading into heat-hazed darkness where the sky met the land without permission. Night had settled in gently, but there was no comfort in it, only exposure. My headlights pushed forward through dust and silence. The road signs had already become rare, then meaningless, then gone entirely. That's when she appeared. A figure standing at mile marker 42, still, upright, waiting as if the world had agreed to stop there. I slowed without thinking. The truck rolled closer, tires whispering over old gravel at the shoulder of the road. The air outside felt different immediately. Dry, cold, and faintly scented. Dried flowers. Not fresh, not living. Something preserved after its time had already ended. She stood just off the lane, under the weak spill of my headlights. A woman, long coat, hair falling loosely over her shoulders, face partially shadowed, but still visible enough to feel real. Too real for a place like this. I stopped a few meters ahead of her, engine idling. The silence outside the truck felt heavier than the sound inside it. She didn't move right away, just watched the vehicle, not the headlights, not the hood, me. Then she walked forward, slow, careful, almost hesitant, as if stepping too quickly might break something unseen. I rolled down the window, slightly. The night air slipped inside immediately. Cool, dry, tinged with that same dried floral scent, like old petals crushed into memory. She stopped beside the door. "I need a ride," she said. Her voice was soft, not pleading, not demanding, just stated, like it had already been decided somewhere else. I hesitated. The road behind her stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no lights, no distant towns. Only darkness. Where to? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the truck. Not the door, not the window, the mirror mounted outside. Her eyes lingered there for a moment longer than comfort allowed. "Farther than here," she said finally. I should have said no. That thought arrived clearly, but without urgency. She stepped closer to the passenger side. The dried flower scent grew stronger, almost nostalgic, almost familiar in a way I couldn't place. "I can open the door," I said after a pause. She shook her head slightly. "No need." I frowned. The truck was locked. I was sure of it. She stood still, waiting, not impatient, not restless, just certain. Then I noticed something. Her reflection wasn't in the side mirror, not distorted, not faint, absent. The glass showed only road, sky, and my own dim silhouette. Nothing else. My grip tightened slightly on the wheel. She didn't react to my silence. Instead, she tilted her head, Just drive, she said. Something in the way she said it made the words feel less like a request and more like continuation, as if the drive had already begun. I hesitated another moment, then unlocked the passenger door. It clicked softly. She didn't open it. It opened on its own, slowly, without wind, without pressure. She stepped inside. The interior air changed immediately. The dried flower scent filled the cab completely now, soft, muted, and oddly heavy, like it had weight instead of smell. The door closed behind her. I didn't remember her touching it. She sat down calmly, hands folded in her lap, facing forward, not adjusting the seat, not looking around, just present. I started driving again. The road ahead remained unchanged, straight, empty, unforgiving. The silence inside the truck was different now. Not empty, occupied. I glanced at her once. She was looking straight ahead, but her reflection still wasn't in the mirror. Only me and the road. Nothing else. You're alone out here? I asked quietly. She didn't turn her head. I wasn't, she said. The answer didn't clarify anything. It only deepened the space between words. The highway stretched on, miles dissolving into more miles. The desert around us felt closer now, as if it had leaned inward to listen. The smell of dried flowers shifted slightly. Now there was something underneath it. Dust, old fabric, time. I checked the mirror again, still empty beside me. But for a fraction of a second, the road in the reflection showed a different version of the highway, wider, broken, with something standing in the distance that shouldn't have been there. I blinked. It was gone. The woman beside me shifted slightly for the first time, not turning, just adjusting her posture. The seat creaked softly beneath her weight. Or what should have been weight. How long have you been waiting there? I asked. She paused. Long enough that the question started to feel like it might not be answered at all. Then, I wasn't waiting, she said. A chill moved through the cab, subtle but undeniable. Not cold air, something else, like awareness changing shape. The truck headlights flickered across the road ahead. For a moment, the lane markings seemed to stretch farther than they should have, then returned to normal. I tightened my focus forward. Don't look too long at anything. That feeling arrived without reason. Just certainty. The woman finally turned her head slightly toward me. Not fully. Just enough for me to feel the direction. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. Like she had already seen every possible version of this moment. You should keep your eyes on the road, she said softly. I nodded without thinking, then realized I hadn't decided to agree. The dried flower scent deepened again. Now it felt like it was coming from inside the vents. Inside the structure of the truck itself, not just the passenger. The mirror flickered again, this time longer. The road behind us shifted slightly in reflection, not geography, not distance, expectation. Something felt positioned there now that wasn't before. When I looked directly forward again, the highway seemed straighter than it had been moments earlier. Too straight, almost intentional. The woman sat perfectly still again. But the air around her felt less like presence and more like continuation, like she had always been part of the drive, just not visible until now. The road sign ahead changed as we approached it. Mile marker 42. Again, the same number, the same place. I slowed slightly, confused. We had already passed this point. Hadn't we? The woman spoke again, almost gently. We're close now. I looked at her, for the first time fully. Her reflection still wasn't in the mirror, but I realized something else. The seat beside her in the reflection wasn't empty anymore, not completely, and I stopped asking where she was going, because the road had already decided we were there. The adobe house stood alone in the desert, like it had been placed there and then forgotten. No road led directly to it. No track circled it, only wind-carved sand stretching in every direction, smooth as if nothing had ever interrupted it. Night had settled in fully. The sky above was a deep, silent black pressed with distant stars that felt too far away to matter. The air was still, almost respectfully so. The house itself was old, thick earthen walls, flat roof, narrow windows cut into the structure like careful wounds. Time had softened its edges, but not erased it. Everything about it felt preserved, not abandoned. Preserved. I stepped inside. The door opened without protest, releasing a breath of air that should have been stale. But it wasn't. It smelled contained. Old cloth, dry cedar, something faintly warm, like memory held too long in closed rooms. The silence inside was immediate, not the kind that follows emptiness, the kind that removes sound after it begins. My footsteps didn't echo. They disappeared. I stopped just inside the entryway. Waited. Listened. Nothing returned. The interior was lit only by thin moonlight filtering through narrow openings in the walls. Pale strips of silver cutting across the floor. Everything was arranged, too carefully. Furniture sat aligned as if measured. Objects placed with intention. Even dust seemed reluctant to disturb the surfaces. A living room extended ahead. Low table, woven rugs, shelves filled with belongings that didn't belong to anyone I could name. But all of it was intact, unmoved, as if someone had stepped out mid-thought and never returned to finish it. I walked forward slowly, each step swallowed immediately by the house. No sound, no feedback, just motion without acknowledgement. The air felt thicker deeper inside, not heavy like humidity, heavy like attention, as if the house was noticing how I moved through it. A framed cloth hung on the wall, not a painting, not decoration. Something older, worn patterns faded almost completely, yet still arranged with care. Beneath it, small personal items rested on a shelf, neatly aligned. A comb, a folded piece of fabric, a ceramic bowl with a hairline crack that had never been repaired. Family belongings. That was the only way my mind could label them, even though there was no sign of a family. I turned slightly. The kitchen area sat beyond a low archway. Empty counters, clean surfaces, utensils placed in exact order. No dust disturbed them, as if cleaning was not an action here, but a rule. Then I noticed a doorway, at the far end of the hall, a tall opening that led into a room I couldn't fully see. The problem was not darkness. It was absence. There was no door, no curtain, no barrier, just a frame of adobe leading into a space that refused to define itself properly. My eyes tried to focus, failed. The room existed, but not in a way that allowed certainty. A faint shift moved through the air, not wind, not movement, something like awareness adjusting its position. I stepped closer. The silence deepened. Even the faint desert hum outside had been cut off completely. Inside this house, nothing was allowed to continue beyond itself. I stopped at the threshold of the room, looked in. The interior was dim, but not empty. Shapes were there, not clearly defined, not fully visible, only suggestion, a sense that something was occupying the space without committing to form. My breath slowed, unnaturally, like the house was regulating it without permission. Then I saw it, behind the doorway frame, a presence, not stepping forward, not retreating, just existing in a way that made the room feel aware of me looking at it. I could not see its face, only the implication of structure and stillness that felt directed. I backed away slightly. The moment I did, the silence shifted, not broken, rearranged, as if my movement had changed the balance of something unseen. The shelf behind me creaked softly, once, then stopped. No follow-up sound, just acknowledgement. I turned my head slowly. Nothing had moved, yet everything felt different. The belongings on the shelf now felt watched, as if they had gained awareness of being observed. I took a step back toward the entryway. The air grew colder. Not temperature, absence, like warmth had been removed rather than lost. The doorway to the unseen room remained unchanged, but I understood something without being told. It was still looking, even if I wasn't. I continued backing away, slow, careful. The floor remained silent beneath me. No resistance, no reaction, only acceptance of movement. As I reached the main entryway again, I paused, looked once more into the house. Everything was still arranged perfectly. Everything was in place. Two in place. The silence inside felt denser now, like it had learned me. Then, from somewhere deeper in the structure, not the room, not the hallway, the house itself, A faint shift occurred. Not sound, not motion, something closer to recognition. I stepped outside quickly. The desert air hit immediately. Dry, wide, open, almost unbearable in contrast. I turned back once. The adobe house stood unchanged, patient, waiting, and for a brief moment, in one of the narrow windows, I could no longer tell if I had ever been inside it at all. The hiking trail began like any other, a narrow line carved through sandstone ridges, stretching forward under sky that felt too large for anything beneath it. Morning light pressed down gently, pale and clean, revealing layers of stone shaped by time and wind. The air was dry but cold at first contact. It carried the scent of heated rock from the day before, mixed with faint dust that rose with every step. I followed the markers. Weathered posts planted at intervals along the trail. Faded paint. Scratched wood. Familiar reassurance in an unfamiliar place. The first hour felt normal. Then I reached the marker again. The same one. Same crack along its surface. Same faded number etched into the wood. Same angle leaning slightly toward the trail. I stopped. Looked back. The path behind me did not look wrong. But it did not feel right either. I continued forward anyway. The sandstone walls on either side narrowed and widened in slow, subtle shifts. Sometimes the trail felt open, sometimes enclosed, yet the marker kept appearing at intervals that no longer matched distance. Each time I passed it, I told myself it was another one. Each time, I noticed the same flaw in the grain of the wood, the same imperfection. Unchanged, the sky began to shift, not in color, in position. The sun moved slightly between glances, not dramatically, not enough to confirm, just enough to unsettle memory. I paused again at the marker. Sweat had begun to form at the back of my neck, though the air remained cool. The scent of stone grew stronger, warm mineral heat rising from the ground, as if the earth was remembering the day too vividly. I turned around slowly. The trail behind me stretched in a way that felt too symmetrical, too evenly spaced, like repetition rather than progression. I walked forward again. 10 steps, maybe more. Then the marker returned. Same position, same wood, same angle. I exhaled slowly, longer this time. Try measure what my mind refused to accept. I touched the wood. Rough, dry, real, yet unchanged by time passing through it multiple times. A faint vibration passed through the stone beneath my boots. Not seismic, not natural, more like resonance, as if the landscape was aware of repeated attention. I pulled my hand away, kept walking. The canyon walls began to feel closer, not physically advancing, just perceived differently. The space between them no longer felt consistent. The trail should have widened at a certain point. It didn't. Instead, it narrowed again, returning me to the same visual proportions I had already passed. The marker appeared again. I didn't stop this time. I walked past it, counted silently. 1, 2, 3. The air shifted slightly behind me. Not wind, expectation. I turned my head carefully. The marker stood there again, behind me, perfectly placed, as if it had moved without disturbing anything around it. My throat tightened. The sky changed again. The sun was now lower than it should have been. Or earlier. Time refused to settle into certainty. I walked faster. The ground beneath my feet remained uneven but familiar. Sandstone broken into layered fragments, warm from hidden heat. The scent of mineral dust thickened with each step. Then I saw it, a marker ahead. Again, identical. Same crack, same lean, same carved imperfection. I stopped, looked back. Another marker behind me, and another further back. The trail was no longer a line. It was a loop that refused to acknowledge its shape. My breathing became more deliberate, controlled, but not calm. I stepped forward anyway. Each marker I passed felt like a repetition of the same moment, slightly altered in timing, but identical in outcome. The sky shifted again. The sun was now almost directly overhead, then slightly behind, then forward again. Impossible positions layered over one another. I stopped walking. Silence filled the space immediately. Even wind hesitated. Then I noticed something ahead on the trail. A shape, standing near the next marker, still waiting, not close enough to identify clearly, but close enough to understand it was facing me. I did not move. The marker beside it was identical to all the others, but now it felt like punctuation, like a pause in something that had already been written. I stepped back. The figure did not advance, but the distance between us did not feel stable. It changed when I wasn't measuring it. The air tightened slightly. Not pressure, recognition. I turned quickly. Behind me, markers extended into the trail in both directions. Too many to count. All identical, all present. The figure ahead had not moved, but I no longer trusted stillness. I began walking again, not forward, not back, just along the trail that no longer defined direction. Every step felt like returning. Every glance felt like losing position. The sky settled into a strange equilibrium, neither rising nor setting, only existing in layered contradiction. The figure remained ahead, closer now, or I was closer to it. I could no longer tell. The final marker I passed had my name carved into it, fresh, like it had been written seconds before I arrived, and beneath it, a date I had not yet lived through. The storm had not fully arrived yet, but the sky already knew. Heavy clouds pressed low over the desert, turning daylight into a dull, bruised gray. The wind carried dust in slow, tired spirals across the ground, as if even motion was reluctant out here. The trading post stood alone. Wooden structure, sagging roofline, faded sign swinging softly above the entrance with no readable name left behind. It looked abandoned, but not empty. Inside, the air felt old in the storm outside. Dry copper scent mixed with rain that hadn't arrived yet, like the building was remembering weather it once experienced. I stepped in. The door closed behind me without sound. No echo, no impact, just finality. Shelves lined the walls. Old goods, dust-covered tins, faded paper labels curling at the edges. Everything untouched. Too untouched. Then I saw the glass. Front display windows stretching across the room, coated in dust thick enough to mute the outside world. And behind that dust, faces, not reflections, not mine, eyes pressed close from the other side, watching from within the glass itself. They moved when I moved, but not in sync, slightly delayed, slightly wrong, like the building was learning how observation worked. I stepped back. The eyes followed. Every direction I turned, they were there, behind shelves, behind windows, between objects that should have blocked sight, watching without blinking. On the counter, an old ledger lay open, pages yellowed, ink dark and uneven. I leaned closer. The date at the top of the page stopped me cold. Tomorrow's date, written as if it had already happened. The wind outside struck the building harder, but inside, no sound changed. Only the eyes grew stiller, waiting. The desert stretches longer when something is following you, not behind, not beside, just present. The coyote appeared near dawn, standing at a distance where heat haze made it uncertain at first. But as light strengthened, it became clear. One animal, watching, not hunting, not fleeing, just accompanying. I walked. It walked. Hours passed. The sun climbed, then hesitated in the sky, like it wasn't sure where to go. The scent of creosote rose after distant rain that never touched the ground near me, wet memory drifting through dry air. The coyote never left, never ran ahead, never fell behind, always visible, always just enough distance to remain unconfirmed as threat or companion. I stopped once. It stopped too. Saturday. Waited. The wind passed between us, carrying dust and heat in uneven waves. Its eyes never left me. By late afternoon, exhaustion blurred the edges of thought. The animal still followed, still unchanged, still patient. Near sunset, I spoke without meaning to. Why are you following me? The coyote tilted its head. Then it said my name. Not loudly, not clearly, but unmistakably. My body froze before my mind accepted it. The desert went quiet in a way that felt absolute. The coyote did not move again, only watched, as if it had always known I would stop walking first. The mesa ended in a clean drop, Stone falling into emptiness, wind moving through like breath through hollow bone. At the edge stood the telephone, a single metal post, a receiver hanging from it. No booth, no shelter, no visible power lines. Yet it was intact, as if it had been placed there recently, not built. The air smelled faintly of dust and old paper, like forgotten messages waiting in heat. I approached slowly. The phone rang. Once. I stopped. It rang again, closer this time. I picked up the receiver, cold metal pressed against my palm, carrying a weight that felt unnecessary for something so small. Static filled the line. Then a voice, not unfamiliar, but not fully known either. It spoke in fragments. My voice, but delayed, incorrect, as if remembering future sentences before I lived them. I pulled it slightly away from my ear. The voice continued without pause, describing me, where I stood, what I would do next. I stepped back from the edge. The voice didn't change tone. It only became clearer, more certain. Then it stopped. A pause. Then softly, "Don't answer again." The phone rang immediately after, without waiting, without mercy. The canyon wall should have been solid, stone layered over centuries, dry and unbroken. But the window was there, perfectly square, cut into sandstone like reality had been edited. No frame, no glass distortion, just opening. The air around it carried mineral heat and stillness, like the desert was holding its breath nearby. I stepped closer. Inside the window was a room, impossible in shape, impossible in depth, a place that should not exist inside stone. The scent inside it felt different, cleaner, older, like air that had never been outside. Someone was there, sitting, watching, but not directly. Each time I focused, the figure changed slightly, different posture, different distance, different version of the same presence, like multiple outcomes of one identity layered in a single space. I reached toward the opening, stopped just before touching it. The room shifted subtly, not reacting, acknowledging. A version of the figure stood closer now, watching me more directly. Then another version appeared behind it. Then another, all still, all observing. The canyon around me felt quieter than before, as if sound had been reassigned elsewhere. I stepped back. The figure inside did not follow, but the feeling of being seen did not leave. It remained anchored to the window, as if the opening was not into the canyon wall, but out of it. The railroad tunnel cut through the hills like a dark throat. Cold air poured from its mouth even in daylight, carrying the scent of wet timber and old iron. Inside, everything echoed too clearly. Every breath, every step, every hesitation. The tunnel stretched forward in a straight line that refused to reveal its end. Stone walls pressed close enough to feel like memory rather than space. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Above me, not inside the tunnel. Above it, where no walkway existed. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Rock shifting, wind over stone. But the rhythm matched mine, perfectly. When I stopped, it stopped. When I walked, it followed. I looked up. Only darkness and stone overhead. Nothing visible. Yet the sound continued. Matching, learning, adjusting. I walked faster. The footsteps above accelerated. I slowed. They slowed. The tunnel air grew colder. Not temperature. Expectation. Then the sound changed. It wasn't matching me anymore. It was anticipating me. One step ahead. I stopped completely. The footsteps above did not stop. They continued once more. But now, they were closer, directly overhead, following from a place that no longer needed alignment with my movement. Something above the tunnel was no longer copying me. It was pacing me. The storm arrived without warning. One moment the sky was open and pale. The next it collapsed into sheets of wind and rain that erased distance completely. I lost the trail. Not gradually, not slowly, just gone. The cabin appeared through the storm like a mistake in the landscape. Small, wooden, bent slightly with age. But something was wrong immediately. No door, only walls, windows, a roof that held steady against the wind. I circled it once. Then again. No entrance existed, yet it was intact. as if it had been built from the inside out. The storm pressed harder. Cold rain stung my face, mixing with pine scent that shouldn't have survived weather like this. I stepped closer. Through the window, I could see warmth, faint light, smoke curling inside. Someone had been here, or still was. I touched the wall. Solid, real, but impossible. The wind howled louder, then suddenly dulled as I stepped beneath the cabin's shadow. Inside, everything was already arranged. Fire burning, dry clothes hanging, empty space waiting like I had arrived late to something ongoing. I did not enter. I could not. And yet, I was already inside. By morning, the storm was gone. The cabin stood alone in open land. No footprint around it. No path to it. Only silence remembering where it had been. The water tank rose above the plain, like a forgotten watchtower. Metal structure, rusted ladder. A faint metallic scent hanging in the air, carried by heat and stored water beneath seal pressure. Night made it worse. The silence out here was never complete. It only waited. I saw the figure the first night, standing beside the tank. Tall, motionless, not leaning, not shifting, just present, like it had been assigned to that exact position. I approached slowly. The metal ladder creaked softly under distant wind. Though nothing else moved, the figure did not react. I stopped at a safe distance. It remained still, not acknowledging me, not ignoring me, simply continuing. The next night, it was there again. Same place, same posture, same silence. The third night, I came closer. The smell of metal intensified. Warm water trapped inside the tank released faint vapor into the cold air. The figure turned slightly. Not fully, just enough for me to understand it was aware of my approach. But it still did not show its face. The wind shifted. The structure groaned. The figure slowly rotated. Not in response. In continuation. As if it had always intended to complete that movement at this exact moment. But I left before it finished turning. Something in me refused to see the final angle. The radio was already in the room when I arrived. Old, battery-powered, covered in dust too evenly spread to be accidental. I don't remember turning it on, but it was already playing. Static first, then voice. Clear enough to understand, close enough to recognize. It described my actions, not generally, precisely, where I had been earlier that day, what I had looked at, how long I had paused before moving. I turned the volume down. The voice continued unchanged, as if volume had no control over it. Night after night, it returned. Same voice, same rhythm, but increasingly familiar. Not because I was learning it, because it was becoming mine. One evening, I realized I had stopped reacting. Another evening, I realized I was finishing its sentences internally before it spoke them. The final broadcast came during silence. No static, no delay, just clarity. It described what I would do next, then stopped and waited, as if listening for confirmation. The desert looked normal at sunset, too normal. Flat horizon, cooling air, long shadows stretching like broken lines. Then the ground began to glow. Not above, below, soft lights moving under the sand like veins of something awake. I knelt. The heat of the earth rose through my hands. The glow shifted when I moved. Following, not reacting. Tracking, patterns formed beneath the surface. Not random, intentional, as if something was mapping me from underneath. I stepped back. The lights followed the shape of my footprints. Perfectly, like memory written in reverse. I ran. The glow moved with me. Not faster, not slower. Equal, patient. The desert above remained silent, unaware, or unwilling to respond. I stopped. The light stopped too, waiting beneath me, still present, still aligned, like something below had already learned my entire path, and was simply deciding when to complete it. The trailer sat alone on flat land. No trees, no road noise, no nearby lights, just thin walls separating me from endless night. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Not heavy, not urgent, just persistent. Every night, the visitor appeared, standing outside the window, always the same position, never approaching, never leaving. I watched it from inside. It watched back, but neither of us acknowledged the glass between. The first night, I thought it would leave. It did not. The third night, I stopped looking directly. The fourth, I found myself expecting it. Then one evening, it was gone. No footsteps, no trace in wet ground, no shadow outside the window. I opened the door. Rain met me immediately. Cold, empty, wide. Nothing stood outside, but the absence felt heavier than presence ever had, like something had finished observing, and decided it no longer needed to remain visible to continue. The desert trail had no beginning anymore, only continuation. Wind moved low across the ground, lifting fine dust that clung to everything it touched. The sky was pale, almost washed out, as if even color had grown tired of staying. I found a marker just beyond a bend in the stone ridge. Weathered wood, deep cracks running through its surface, like old scars. But what stopped me wasn't its condition. It was my name, carved into the post. Fresh, too fresh for the age of the wood around it. Beneath it, a date, not past, not present, future. The air around the marker felt different, not colder, not warmer, certain, as if the world had already agreed this moment would happen long before I arrived inside it. I stepped closer. The scent of age would rose faintly, like something disturbed after long silence. My fingers hovered near the carving, did not touch, because I understood something I didn't want confirmed. The marker wasn't placed here. It was waiting here, for me to notice it and accept it. The valley opened wide under evening light. Cliffs on both sides held shadows like spilled ink, stretching downward into silence. Then the sound came, a melody, soft, distant, carried across space that should not have allowed it. No source, no direction, only presence. It drifted through wild herbs growing along the slope, bending their stillness as if they remembered being alive in rhythm. I stopped walking, listened. The tune felt familiar, not because I recognized it, because something inside me reacted to it as memory. Even though no memory existed, the air shifted slightly with each note, like the valley itself was breathing in time with it. I followed, not willingly, not unwillingly, just drawn. The deeper I moved, the more the melody changed, not composition, intention, as if it was adjusting itself to match my understanding. The path led nowhere, only further into sound. And the sound led further into something I could not name, but still followed. He appeared at dawn, every dawn, same ridge, same posture, standing where the first light of day touched the land before anything else could claim it. The air was cold, thin, carrying the last breath of night. He never spoke, never moved first, only watched the horizon as if waiting for it to remember something. At first, he was just a shape, then a silhouette, then something almost recognizable. Each day, clearer. Each day, closer to familiarity that felt wrong to approach. I began avoiding his direction, but avoidance didn't change presence, only awareness. One morning, I realized his face was no longer unknown. It was shifting toward recognition, not becoming someone else, becoming someone I already knew. I stopped pretending I didn't see it. He didn't react, only stood in the rising light, patient, like recognition was inevitable, and I was simply late to understanding why. The return was not intentional. It simply happened. The desert folded distance until I was back where everything had started. The ground looked the same, but felt older. Dust hung motionless in the early light, refusing to settle or rise, as if time itself had stopped allowing movement here. Then I saw them, the footprints, the first ones, the ones I remembered noticing at the beginning. They were there, but now they ended. No continuation, no return path, no deviation, just finality pressed into sand. I followed them to their last mark, stopped, looked ahead. Nothing marked what came next, only open space. And waiting, the silence felt complete in a way that erased direction, not absence, conclusion. Whatever had been following me was no longer behind anything. It was simply beyond the final step I was willing to take. And I understood There was no way back from something that had already finished happening. The desert stretched endlessly at dusk. Light faded slowly, like something reluctant to leave. The air cooled, carrying the faint scent of earth settling after heat. I walked, not because I was searching, not because I was escaping, just because stillness no longer felt like an option. Then I saw it, a shape on the horizon, distant, unmoving, unclear, not threatening, not inviting, simply present. It watched without effort, without urgency, as if observation was its natural state. I stopped walking. The wind moved around me, but not through me. Everything felt arranged toward that single point. The shape did not approach, did not change, but I no longer felt distance as separation, only delay, a pause between understanding and acceptance. I exhaled slowly, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to turn away. The figure slowly shifted, not toward me, not away, just slightly aside, like it had finished deciding something. Then it faded, not disappearing, receding into the horizon, as if it had always belonged there. And I remained, under a sky that no longer promised answers, only continuation,